Okay, Peter, let's talk. This is turkey talk now, today. Deer talk is what everybody came to listen for, and we're going to talk a little bit about deer. And I see your monster muleys in the background there. Both muleys, right?
I do have a couple muleys from my time living in Wyoming.
Pretty awesome. Where'd you live in Wyoming?
I lived in Casper.
Oh, yeah.
Fun little tiny town right there on the North Platte. I actually lived right above a place called the Ugly Bug Fly Shop for a short time, but that's where I really enjoyed chasing muleys.
Man, that is awesome hunting out there. So we're talking turkeys today with Peter. Peter works with the National Wild Turkey Federation. Has been there for quite a while. But the first thing, and everybody is talking about this, you guys are on the East Coast, South Carolina, the Southeast states we hear about basically as turkey hunting, I guess, mecca as far as history goes. Up here in the upper Midwest, it's been really, since I've been here for almost 30 years, it's really increased. But what we see as far as popularity goes, I mean, we started turkey hunting back in 92, and it grew. But now I think what people are talking about nationwide, what's going on with the turkey population? Is it going down nationwide?
So you're correct in that there are some ebbs and flows with the entire wild turkey population across the country. There are some places that are experiencing declines. You have your plain states, Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, and then you have some pockets within the Southeast. And so right now, more than ever before, the NWTF is really trying to figure out what is at the root of the problem for some of these declines, because right now it can't be narrowed down to just one thing. I once heard one of your notable biologists, it was probably Mike Chamberlain, but he was talking about it to where it's if you think about what is needed to help populations thrive, you think about it almost like an offense for a football team, or even just the entire football team as a whole. If you have one aspect, maybe it's the wide receivers, the tight ends, or the defense, or your kicking game, special teams. If any of those one aspects are off, or even if you got a little bit of problems across the board, that can cause your loss, or wherever you end up seeing it. But it's a variety of different things that's all leading to really the low poult recruitment, and we're below that poult recruitment that is needed to be able to sustain populations, not even to grow in most areas, or at least that's what's been recorded through some of the poult surveys and through some of the research that's been done.
So if you had to, I know you probably don't want to do this, but I'm going to ask you. If you had
Absolutely.
to pick out a couple states that are really feeling it, I kind of have a feeling might know which ones they are, but especially in the Southeast, which ones are really struggling with it right now?
I'd say, one of them is right here at home in South Carolina. When I moved here 10 years ago, I want to say we were at 5 birds, and then we went down to 3 birds, and they've looked at some different changes now, to where they're even talking to going down to 2 birds. But I would say South Carolina is one. I know that I've heard things out of Georgia. I've heard things out of Tennessee. But it's in pockets within the states. There are still some places within the states, even here in South Carolina, where numbers are just fine. It's just when you look at the landscape as a whole that things are lower across the board.
Same thing with Alabama, right?
I believe that one does not rise to the top for me, just off of things that I've had in conversations with others. But I'm sure with it being right here in that southeastern corridor, Georgia, South Carolina, Alabama, and I don't know whether Mississippi's having the same issue as well. But anecdotally, what people are saying is that there just aren't as many turkeys across the landscape as there were, at the height of turkeys. When we were at that peak of almost 7 million birds on the
That's
landscape.
insane. Those were the good old days. And when we talk about history for turkey hunting, modern turkey hunting, I guess you'd call it in the United States, would you put those 3 states, I guess, as, I know you probably have to throw Virginia in there too, but South Carolina, Alabama, Georgia, Is that kind of what the epicenter was, say, 100 years ago?
Honestly, I couldn't speak to that, but I know things were pretty hot and heavy up in Pennsylvania, and you got a lot of history in places like New York as well. But I know that the Southeast there is a lot of history. I think even some of it was touched on in Mossy Oak's recent Colonel in the Fox film, and just some of the restoration efforts that were going on down here. I want to say one of the first places where rocket netting was used was right here in South Carolina, so on the Francis Marion National Forest. So it is a center of probably some of that historical stuff, but I wouldn't scratch some of those other states off the board.
And the other thing too that I find fascinating, I'll give everybody just a little history lesson here. For us, Wisconsin, we didn't really have them. They started trap and transplanting up here, and I'm sure Brian will bust my chops for not knowing this. Brian Lovett, who worked here for 20 years with me side by side. I think in the 80s, it was probably the early to mid 80s when it first started, and it just kind of took off. And then back in those days, that was when deer and deer hunting and turkey hunting. Oh, actually, deer and deer hunting was independently owned, and I don't know if I've shared this story in the podcast. Ian, tell me if I have or not. But Jack Brower, rest his soul, who just passed away here 2 weeks ago, and Al Hofacker, they wanted to start a new magazine. And they said it could be either turkey and turkey hunting or bear and bear hunting, because Al loved bear hunting. And Deb Knauer, who was our national sales manager at the time, she said, there's more opportunity in turkeys. And we knew nothing. I mean, I wasn't here then, but it was like, from this part of the country, nobody knew anything about turkey hunting. And then they started that, I think in 1991, I believe. And then it just took off. And then you saw states like Minnesota and Illinois and all these people around us who had some turkeys. Those populations started growing. And I know there's all sorts of different things, but you talked about habitat, you talked about recruitment. A couple of things that, Peter, I want you to touch on is, I know there's several different categories, but the one that gets the emphasis is the number of predators out there. And people say, well, people aren't trapping anymore. That's why there's not as many turkeys. How much water can you hold to that statement?
I think even just organizationally, we recognize predator control is a part of what's needed. But just like you think about even us as hunters, if we're out on the landscape and we're looking for turkey, we know the exact places to go because the turkeys have limited use of the space within their area, or limited usable space. It makes it easier for us to go find the birds. If we know that the turkeys are using as much of let's say 100-acre property as they possibly can because it's suitable for different aspects of their daily routine and their daily lives, well, now it gets a little bit tougher as to figure out where they're going to be. And the same thing's true for your predators, whether it be coyotes, bobcats, things like that. So I think that conservation work on the landscape and making sure that you have proper nesting and brooding habitat in close proximity to each other, and that you have food and that you have good roost availability. Looking at some of those things up front can help. And then anything that you can do beyond that with things like predators is a secondary step. But again, it's if we know exactly where the turkeys are going to be because they can't use this entire section of the property just because it's not suitable for their daily lives, the predators are going to figure that out too. And they're going to go where it's easiest to get the birds.
That's a really good point. And that's we talk about deer all the time. Habitat first, and not just good cover, but winter cover for deer is very important. Overwinter habitat, we talk about it, and it's something that the average guy can't really grasp or do much about because a lot of times that's a regional thing. I know turkeys is similar and different. Also with turkey, I want to stay on the predator thing for a little bit, because you do say that's something that you need to look at. I really shouldn't throw this out there. I wholeheartedly believe that it can make or break somebody's property. If you are trapping, here we are blessed that we can trap on our property year round. And I wear out the raccoons. Now, I know raccoon biology and you can touch on this too, even with coyotes, you put the pressure on coons and coyotes, guess what? It just doesn't end there. If you just kill a whole bunch of coons and coyotes, that population, Mother Nature, I always say God has got a way of working things out. They become more productive. I know you guys have reported on some of that. So it's not something where it's like you take your foot off the gas and say, yeah, we trapped a bunch of coons this fall or spring or whatever. Now we're going to have more turkeys. It doesn't quite work that way, does it?
You're right. And it also comes down to how much space are you able to actually try to impact what are your neighbors doing. I mean, for myself, where I have a very tiny property that I lease just for deer hunting, I don't even have the turkey rights on it here in South Carolina, but there's not a dent that I'm going to be able to make on 120 acres if my neighbors aren't doing anything either. So really, you're correct, I believe. And again, I'm not a biologist by trade or anything. I'm a communications guy.
Well, you know enough about it. You deal with it enough.
But yeah, that's really the sentiments that you hear is that this isn't just a one step, pick it up for a short time, and boom, you're going to have turkeys into perpetuity or anything like that. I mean, if you're going to pick it up, you got to continue it and do it year in and year out. And if you just kind of touching back on the conservation angle just for a second, I think I've seen some studies, and I can't remember the most recent one, but it talked about how if you're impacting your landscape through prescribed fire, that's actually an area that predators stay away from for a short time after that, whereas we know that turkeys love to be in there shortly afterwards. So, again, there's all kinds of things that you can be doing, but really it's if you're going to take up management practices of a property, continue it to try to make that long-term effect, not just
is that one of the better? I see a lot written about that. I see a lot of shows about it. Is prescribed fire kind of like your ace in the hole for taking over a fallow property that's not really doing much for the wildlife?
I think it's one of those big things that you can do right off the bat, and it's figuring out what's your cycle for burning on that property. But it is good for nesting and brood habitat, and just that new growth, the bugs that you get there. I would say that's one of the important things that you can do for turkeys.
We actually we're going to see if we can put a link up for it, Ian. We did our partners at Auburn University. I know Dr. Galsby has done a lot with that, with studying turkey production in relation to prescribed fire. It's something that we don't see a lot up here. I know it's quite common in the southern states, but it is something that you can do everywhere. And it's not just for turkeys. If you have quail, if you have ruffed grouse, deer, whatever, you give those native species a chance to come back. It's not a cure-all by any means. You get a lot of invasives up here, especially, but that does help. That is interesting. The other thing I want to talk to Peter, and I know that I dive probably real heavy into this stuff because it's something my mind is always trying to figure out how Mother Nature works. And you talked about back in the day, for you in South Carolina, you got 5 turkeys. I'm assuming your season's a month long or longer than that?
It depends. So there's two parts of the state. One of them opens up right now. This year, one of them opened. I want to say it was like around March 20th, 22nd, and then runs to the end of April. I think the upper part of the state started around April 1, goes until like May 10th. Public land is only open the month of April.
Wow.
It's private lands that either start earlier or end later. Is what.
And you can hunt that whole time frame,
except for Sundays on private land or on public lands.
On public land, so it's different.
Private land you can still hunt.
Every state's different, as you know. Here, ours is you get a week, you get 7 days, and you apply. You get a tag. Well, we have 6 periods, and if you play your cards right, you can buy extra tags, which I do. So you can, if you're unlucky, you can hunt 1 week or 2 weeks. If you're lucky, you can buy enough tags to hunt 3, 4, or 5 weeks. And other states have it like you where they open it up. Has there been any research on that as far as season lengths and bag limits and how that affects populations?
I think right now some of the research that's out there is looking at what is the best ideal start time, not on an actual day, but it's where can we look at on the timetable of breeding to where hens are going off to nest, but turkeys are still gobbling, because obviously for turkey hunters, that's a huge part. I mean, we'll go out and we'll hunt birds, and if they're not talking, I mean, we're still going to spend time in the woods, but part of it is that waking up in the morning, hearing the birds, and interacting with them. So if it's too far past to where you're not even getting any birds gobbling anymore, I mean, obviously hunter satisfaction can kind of go down. But they're looking at what's an ideal time, and I know some of the research that was done as they're looking to do things here in South Carolina, for instance, and this is just close to home, is that they said basically if you start the season on April 10th, that allows a majority of your breeding to be done, but where turkeys are still gobbling, hens are still moving off to nests, but you're not impacting that breeding cycle, because some of the studies that they've also done here in South Carolina, breeding is much more concise when you're not having hunting overlapping the season. And they did that just right down here on SRS, Savannah River Site, which is, I don't know the full acreage of the property, but I mean, it's 100,000 acres easy probably, where they're doing studies and figuring out what are the turkeys doing where they are not impacted by hunters on the landscape interrupting their breeding.
And what about some states? They have, like, I remember back in the day, now I haven't hunted there in a while, so I don't know what the rules are now, but back in the day, Missouri made you stop at like noon or 1 o'clock or something like that.
They changed that this year. I think they went to 24 hour, or not 24 hour. They went to all day
hunting.
Here in South Carolina, and this just goes to the different things that I think people are trying. It's here in South Carolina, early part of the season. I think it's the first week or 2 weeks, you can only kill one bird out of your 3 during that time. All your birds after that, you can then only kill 1 a day. And then you have other states where Texas, for instance, I think you can get 4 tags in certain parts, and if you're lucky, you could kill all 4 turkeys in a day.
Knock yourself out, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there are different things that are being tried. I want to say Tennessee recently delayed their season a little bit. But there is research going on to try to figure out what is an ideal time frame. Again, not based on an actual day, but looking at from the start of breeding to winter hens bred and moving off to nest, to where if you are out on the landscape hunting, you're not disrupting that breeding cycle.
Which would make sense, you know, from states, because the way we are built around the climate, it's warmer there. It gets warmer in South Carolina than it does here. When you're hunting turkeys, it's still winter here, so that breeding is delayed. So it would make sense, but don't you think there should be? This is just your personal opinion. This isn't the opinion of NWTF. Your personal opinion is, shouldn't states? Because I've always lobbied for deer hunting to have more, and I hate to use this word, nationalized regulations, because biology in Wisconsin is no different than biology in Illinois. So if they say that, shouldn't states be more unified in how they're approaching this?
Absolutely, and I'll say this just from a blanket statement from my own personal opinion. The way that states run applications of hunting permits and hunting seasons and everything, there could be a lot more uniformity. Just from that standpoint, just because I think it's confusing at times just for us as hunters, and we're all invested. And we all want to be doing what's right for the birds, but I think that there could be more done that helps states share information across state lines and even make things a little bit more uniform. This is actually one thing that the NWTF's technical committee has been working on, and this is to make the process for summer brood, and summer flock counts more unified across the landscape. I mean, I think if you talk to Mark Hatfield, who oversees our science and planning here at NWTF, he'll tell you that at one point, when we're trying to figure out what populations are, and again, this is somewhat of a guesstimate across the landscape. There's not exactly 125,000 birds in whatever state might say that's what they have, but they're trying to come up with estimations of where the population stands. But the way that they estimate birds in Missouri is probably different than Virginia, than Wisconsin, than South Carolina. And so at least if we can get everybody to the point, and they're starting this, and I can't remember how many states, but it's well north of 20, have all adopted a certain method of doing their counts. Well, at least now we know that the way that they're coming up with things mathematically is the same ballpark.
That's excellent.
And I feel like that's a huge step in the right direction. I'll have to pick his brain and get you more details on that.
I wish we could do that with deer hunting, because that's an excellent idea. Because deer hunting in Michigan, they've got bridge counts. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but they just got DNR guys standing on a bridge counting the number of dead deer on vehicles during gun season, and then they put it in a formula. Back here in Wisconsin, we used to have mandatory in-person registration. So if we said we killed 618,274 deer, which we did in 2001, we killed that many deer.
That was how many they physically counted.
That's how many they physically counted. And then in other states, it's just like, not to pick on the South, but I've done that Deer Hunter's Almanac I've worked here for 30 years. And I would call Alabama, and I'd say, what's your estimated deer population? And he'd say, well, what did Georgia say? I'm not kidding you. And then lo and behold, their number was always a little bit higher than theirs,
I believe you. I mean, here in South Carolina, I think with my general sportsman's license or my big game license, I can kill 5 deer, and then I can buy additional buck tags and doe tags. And then if you buy up all your additional doe tags, I think they give you an extra 2, or at least that's what it used to be. But it was like I could kill about 13 deer a year here in South Carolina.
Which you're not going to do.
I haven't ever done that. But my family primarily eats venison year round. So I try to at least get a few each year. But there's no, other than me tagging that deer with the sticker plastic tag I put around its foot, and then I take it home and process it. There's no count of me reporting that unless I get a deer survey at the end of the year and I fill that out. And I think that's that next step. And again, this is a personal opinion, Pete's opinion, not NWTF's. But if they made those surveys, those harvest surveys, either to where you had to call in your bird or deer for that matter, or if you didn't participate in that harvest survey, then that would potentially hurt you on the back end. Then that could up the amount to really help figure out where numbers stand. Probably
that's what we have here. You have to call your bird in. You've got 24 hours. You've got to call.
And I think they changed that here in South Carolina where you.
And when we were in Illinois, they had the same thing, I believe, right?
Yes, they did.
So Pete and I just got back last month. We hunted in Illinois. For me, it was the first time, and it was a cool experience. But for me, it was different in the fact that I've been blessed. I've been able to hunt some awesome spots over the years, states, and some of the best land you've ever seen. But the turkey numbers were nothing what I thought they would be. I did shoot a bird, but it was like, I thought this is just going to be like Missouri, like back in the heyday when it was like you'd hear literally 100 gobblers. Well, it wasn't that way. Deer Talk Now is brought to you by Wildlife Research Center and the new Golden Rope Scent Rope Kit. The kit comes with 4 ounces of Golden Rope Scent Concentrate, 3 cable ties, and 3 scent ropes made of proprietary fibers meant to absorb the maximum amount of scent. Simply saturate the rope in your scent of choice, hang it from a branch, and watch the trail cam photos come flying in. For more information, go to wildlife.com. I want to go back to kind of talking about that. Here's a comment, and something that stuck with me the entire time I've worked in this industry, and it came from biologists. I want to get your opinion on this one. Back in the day, they told us you can't stockpile game birds. Just can't do it. The populations are too fickle. There's too many things involved. And what they were referring to mostly was like ruffed grouse, pheasants, quail, and turkeys. Do you buy that?
By
stockpiling mean like we can't limit the harvest because you know what, next year's population, let's just talk turkeys, next year's population is going to be whatever it is. So it's like And I said, well, why do they say you can only kill one then? Well, that's different. Like, to me, it doesn't make any sense. It's like I always thought, like,
I wouldn't buy that then.
If you limit the harvest, like you said, okay, at some states you could kill 5. Now you can only kill 3. Well, that means you can probably at least maintain or increase that population. Otherwise, you wouldn't have you wouldn't have bag limits, right?
Yeah, I'm not smart enough in the biology sense, but that seems to be counterintuitive. I would say it probably all depends on when those animals are taken from the landscape, whether or not. Yeah, there's a lot of factors, but that would seem to be counterintuitive.
And one thing we do know is it only takes one gobbler to breed a lot of hens, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, I suppose there's some thought there that, well, you don't have to worry about wiping out this population because, but then again, if you're in a state with 300,000 turkey hunters and everybody has a couple tags, it doesn't take much to think like, we probably should somehow figure out how to limit this at least a little bit, especially if you see those numbers coming down.
Sure. There was actually, I caught just the tail end of this, so Brett's probably going to get upset with me if he hears me try to regurgitate some of what he said at the NWTF convention. But, we always have Mike Chamberlain and Brett Collier come and hang out, and they love chatting turkey science with folks, but they always put on a seminar there. And I caught part of the end of it where he was talking just about the regions which that turkeys operate in, and it basically said, you have these pockets that are kind of spread across the landscape, and he said some of these pockets they may have overlap with other flocks, but largely they are operating within their own flock in their own area, but if you take too many birds out of that flock, they may get absorbed into one of the other flocks. And then that means that you no longer have turkeys where there were once turkeys before. Wow. And now that they're doing some research to try to look at this more, but that was one of the things that they're trying to figure out is what happened up front that we put so many turkeys on the landscape that once that they spread out, and now that things have kind of gone to settling back in, that there's pockets that just maybe doesn't have suitable habitat. You've killed too many of the gobblers from an area, so they've gotten absorbed into other groups, and it may take time for them to reestablish. So I would say that you truly do need limits, and maybe it's even looking further into how those limits are established, instead of it just being broad landscape. Again, personal opinion here, just based off of what I heard.
And this is making a lot of sense because I'm going to add to it when you're done here.
But it's when I look at Wyoming, for instance, when I lived there, I mean there were different areas, game units within the state, and some of them you could hunt with a general tag. Some of them you had to put in for a draw tag to be able to hunt that specific area. But it was looking at it on a more localized landscape area of how many birds do we have in this particular region to establish the limit versus, hey, statewide, 5 birds, have fun, kind of get out there and go enjoy yourself. But I think that what we do know, at least from the scientist perspective, is a lot of the stuff that we thought to be true about turkeys 10, 15, 20 years ago isn't really what we thought it was now that we're learning more. And there's more research going on across the landscape right now than ever before for some of these guys like Chamberlain and
these guys have done some fascinating work at NWTF. But to pick up on his thought, this is a point that I try to emphasize with deer hunting, but I'm going to make it with turkey hunting. So let me step on my soapbox here for a second. So let's say you have 5 tags. Let's say you have 3. The key to remember is don't go out and try to kill all those turkeys off of one property, because there's nothing you can do about your neighbors. You can sit there and complain and say the state's giving out too many turkey licenses. I'd say the solution to that for your own enjoyment is really rein yourself in on your own hunting property if you want to have turkey hunting, really good turkey hunting for the next 5, 10, 20, 30 years, and then have those backup spots. And any good turkey hunter will tell you that. I've hunted with Brian Lovett and Eddie Salter and Don Shipp and Chris Parrish and some of these best turkey hunters. They always told me, you got to have an ace in the hole. That's that old Chris Ledoux song. You got to have an ace in the hole. And not only an ace in the hole, a couple of aces and queens and jacks in the hole. And the fact that I've got these other properties that I can hunt, if you're really eaten up with turkey hunting, that you can enjoy it and not jeopardize what you're doing on your small thing. Okay, I got to cut myself off because I got a couple questions I want to get to you yet, Peter, and then I want to ask about the initiatives that the NWTF has going. But two things, easy ones, I think, hopefully for you. In your opinion, what is the number one nest predator of turkeys? And now I'm talking about nest predators of the hen is laying her eggs and before those things are hatched.
Oh, so even to answer this, I was chatting with Brett again the other day, and he said, I think one of the things that we need to do is redefine what is a nest predator, because he said raccoons, possums, things like that, they are not going to bump a hen off the nest and get her eggs. They're more opportunistic. If she's not there, they stumble upon it, they may end up finding it. But from talking with some of those guys, I think bumping a hen off her nest, and again, this is Pete here. This is and just from
you don't have to preface it anymore.
It's I would say it seems like bobcats are one of the top
really
predators for being able to take over a nest, but also to disrupt hen behavior that could cause nest abandonment and then get the nest.
Okay, and then what about what's the top predator for poults?
Oh,
I have an idea, but I'm going to let you answer it.
I don't. I would say it would have to be a variety of different things. Probably looping bobcats back in, maybe birds of prey.
Those are.
Anecdotally, I've heard things like that people said that they've seen a hen and poults working across a field, and they saw ravens and crows basically come down and attack, and basically pick off.
That's what I've heard. I haven't seen it personally.
I've never seen that, but again, and I'm gonna throw this back out there. Always having that conservation card. I think if you have the right habitat, we can help lessen any of that impact that any of those particular. That's
a good point. I've heard from a lot of guys, especially seasoned trappers. They say crows are the number around here. Now that could be different. Like you say bobcats. Well, we don't have a lot of bobcats here. We have a lot of fox and coyotes. We have fishers, and up north we have martins.
Down here I don't even think we know what a fisher is.
A fisher is a nastiest little. Just think of it as a cat-sized weasel. They are nasty little creatures. I've got them in my backyard. But yeah, so it could be different things. I find that interesting though, and I know that we've published a few things on it. I've seen things on your website about how actually effective mother hen is in protecting those nests. But that doesn't stop me from wearing out the raccoons and skunks and possums when I can, because we know that they've got to be managed just as much as any other animal, and every little bit helps. Okay, so that that brings us.
I think you're 100% correct on that. If you're making an impact for them, it gives the hen more time or less worries when she does have to get up off the nest. It's a critical series of days. Obviously, what is it, around 40 days?
Is that what it is? 40 days?
Yeah, I think from nest to even fly up.
Oh, that's the other thing I wanted to ask you, because I don't know this. When that hen is nesting, she's kind of like a chicken, right? Because I have laying hens. She'll lay an egg a day, right, until she's done? Turkey hen?
I don't know that.
Okay. Well, somebody chime in and educate me on this, because I think turkeys lay eggs the same way as chickens do. And I know it's got to be multiple paternity there as well. So if she's being bred by more than one gobbler, she can be bred, I'm assuming, 2, 3, 4 times in that whole nesting process, that it has a higher success rate. That's the kind of stuff that I get geeky about, because it's like, I know she's not just breeding once and boom, then she's got 12.
No, it definitely takes a series of days for all the eggs to be laid, but whether it's one a day or and that I don't know.
Okay, all right. So let's talk about briefly NWTF. What's going on there, and what are some of the new initiatives you guys got going on?
Oh man, I feel like it's been Well, I feel like it's been a really good past couple of years, but we also, that's building upon 50 years of history of dedicated members, volunteers, the people who really are the lifeblood of the organization, helping helping to be a part of what's, in my opinion, one of the greatest success stories when it comes to wildlife restoration. But even just if you look back to the past 2 years, and we're in our third year of it, the first thing that comes to mind, because it's on the top of everybody's mind, is what is going on in the world of turkey research. And I touched on, just saying there's more research going on right now than ever before. I think if you look at all the pieces of research that are being funded from a national, and then also there's some that are being funded at a state level, it's I want to say it's around 24 or 25 total projects that the NWTF is a part of, and it's something like I want to say the number was something like 30 plus research institutions or research entities that are partnering in that. I mean, there's some where it's dual universities being a part of things, but that's the biggest thing. And to know that there's more going on right now than ever before, and it's not just about, oh man, we got to figure out the decline, but it's also looking at what are areas that maybe not having decline yet, but what's going on there that's led to explosions of birds like never seen before. I mean, because there are parts of the country where there are still a lot of turkeys, and I think anybody can jump on a computer and see where those spots are. Um, but for the members and our volunteers, knowing that their dollars are being partnered with other dollars at an extremely high match rate, to where I think we've put more than 1.2 million in the past 2 years, and we're ready to start funding our third RFP this year, already taking in those projects that we think need to get done. And every single one of these projects is also being vetted through the Turkey Technical Committee that we head up, and that's got input from all the different state agencies. So we're not just doing this in a vacuum and going, hey, this sounds like a good idea to the NWTF, let's throw money at it. We're figuring out with a group of folks from all the state agencies what's going to be impactful not only for this region but areas beyond that, to where lots of people can get good information out of this in the long run. So I'm excited to see what ends up coming out of that. But it's 1.2 million coming from us to be matched with. I think it's more than 12 million.
Wow.
In match funding. So and there's not many folks that can take money like that and then be able to partner it, almost at a 10 to 1 or plus 10 plus 1 to 1 odd, to be able to carry out great work. The second thing is, we've talked about the southeastern part of the country. Is obviously we realize that there are some declines here, and again, we know that there's a lot of different things that can play a role in that poult recruitment, but quality nesting and brood habitat in close proximity to each other make a huge difference in trying to increase that percentage or survival rate for those poults. So what we did is last year we created our Habitat for the Hatch initiative, and that's that national initiative covering states from the south corners of Missouri and Illinois, all the way over to, I want to say Virginia is a part of it, Florida, and then back to Texas. I mean, I want to say around 24 states that are a part of it, that on top of all the conservation work that we're doing and trying to get land acquisitions and everything else that we're already doing as a part of that mission to conserve the wild turkey and preserve our hunting heritage, we're trying to positively impact or positively conserve or enhance an additional 1 million acres through additional funds that we're trying to raise for that particular initiative. So we just posted something up on the website. I want to say it was this past week, but it was kind of forecasting where we're going to end up for 2024. And it talks about some of the states even within that region. Georgia, for instance, that's saying, hey, we realize that the problem of turkeys is much bigger than the state of Georgia, and we're going to donate some of our money from here in Georgia to this national initiative that'll hopefully benefit the entire region. And when you see stuff like that, to me, that's pretty cool, because that's going back to the days of, hey, we don't have turkeys, but people that did have a surplus of turkeys were willing to box up some turkeys from our own backyard and ship them across the country because they knew that it was good for everybody and it was good for the turkey population as a whole. And I think getting people to think more broad landscape level instead of, man, I don't have as many turkeys as I did in that one field, we're getting them to think about, or we're trying to shift that perspective to, this is a landscape level issue, and it's going to require landscape level analysis to help figure out where we need to be. So, I mean, those are the two big things that we have. We're in our third year of an initiative primarily out in your western states, that Great Plains Central Corridor, but it's called Waterways for Wildlife. And in some of those regions that are also experiencing declines of turkeys, one of the biggest things out there that impacts turkey survival rate is quality roost sites. And so it's how do we maintain these very important water corridors to make sure that we're getting rid of invasive species, helping things like those cottonwoods survive, providing good nesting and brood habitat in those regions. But it also has that secondary benefit of just overall water ecosystem health. And I think anybody that enjoys a cold beer enjoys clean water.
That's right.
I mean,
That's right.
It kind of all leads together. Wisconsin, you guys like beer.
We've got a little bit. They do. They dabble in it a little bit. Yeah. No, that's something the NWTF has always done, and I think everybody should appreciate and support. Is it's basically giving back to the environment. So is it .org? I can't remember. It's NWTF.
NWTF.org is the start of going down the rabbit trail. We try to leave enough information on the front page. But we're an organization that was built upon the conservation of the wild turkey, the preservation of our hunting heritage. So we're trying to give you all the information there at NWTF.org that helps you know where our member dollars are going. But we're also wanting to help this thing that we love, this turkey hunting culture. We want to help it survive. So even if you just need some of those tips and tactics, you can find some of that stuff there too. That's
great stuff. Well, Peter, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate you taking time out and talking turkey on Deer Talk Now today.
Absolutely.
All right, for Peter Muller, I am Dan Schmidt. Be sure to like and subscribe. That's all we ask of you, whether you're listening to this podcast or watching the video versions on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and elsewhere. Until next Thursday, we will catch you we'll be back to deer next week. Until next Thursday, we'll catch you again for another episode of Deer Talk Now.